Let's start with Martin from Chicago. How are things in the Bayless house following Ernestine's appearance? Oh, that's an interesting question because they're different. I got to tell you, I had the greatest week with my wife I've had in knowing her for 17 years. She was flying the whole week because the reaction was so shockingly positive from social media, from fans, from friends, and from me. I was blown away by Ernestine's hour that she spent with me. Pleasantly so, because she had done 2 short segments, live TV on Undisputed, 2, 8 to 10 minute segments, and she'd been very good. But I'm thinking, a whole hour? Can she sustain? Yeah, could she? Could she ever? She took the show over for an entire hour. So the point is, as I reflect back on it, that hour for me was like couples therapy for an hour, minus the shrink and the fee. Because I think we learned a lot about each other, and all for the better. I think we got better as a couple. I think we got happier as a couple. I think we shared some things that we've never shared before, right before your very eyes and ears. So just to retrace the steps, we finished here. We taped around 11 a.m. LA time here at the Fox Studios, West LA. But the episode, as you probably know, does not drop until the following morning, which would be Wednesday. We tape Wednesday for Thursday. I'll get it right. We tape Wednesday for Thursday. And in the interim, because she had driven to the Fox Studios in a separate car, we drove home one behind the other. And she knows that I don't love to talk about my shows on Undisputed because I always tell her, if she says, how'd it go? I don't know. I don't have any idea. Some days I think I was pretty good, and some days, most days, I don't. But I don't watch shows back. I don't want to critique. I've told you before, I don't want to turn into an actor. Oh, I should have grimaced there. I should have chuckled. No, I should have rolled my eyes. I don't know what I do. I just do. I just be me. And if nothing else, what I love the most about my wife, Ernestine, she is as real as it gets, and she and I were as real as it could get for that whole hour in episode 19. But she didn't say much when we got home because she knew I was wiped out. Wednesday is my 2-a-day day. It's Undisputed that rolls right into crazy prep for the podcast. And here I go. And when it's over, because I don't sleep much Tuesday night going into Wednesday, usually about 4 hours, got a game to watch, got a game to prep for, Undisputed to prep for. I was pretty well shot and spent, so she let me be. I napped for about an hour, got up. I always lift weights on Wednesdays when I get back in the saddle. And I was lifting weights as the game started that evening, and she wandered in and said, so, how do you think it went? And I turned the question back on her. How do you think it went? She said, I thought it went pretty well. And I flat out told her, I thought you were great, because I did. I told her that I was so proud of her and that her late great mother would have been even prouder. Evelyn, I know you're watching up there somewhere. Your daughter knocked it dead. And I'm speaking straight from my heart because I wasn't sure if she could hang with the hour. And she convinced me once again, and I'm speaking straight from the heart, she's a flat-out natural on television. She has no background, no experience, no training, natural. And I've told her again and again before, I think you should do your own podcast. She's got friends who have offered, and I don't know, a life podcast, pop culture podcast, something besides sports, because as we made it clear, I didn't choose her for sports. I chose her because of her spark, her charisma. At the end of the podcast, we were asked a question about describe the other in 3 words. I'll get to her response in just a few minutes, but mine was unsinkable, charismatic dynamo. That's her. She's a handful. Her temper can be as quick and even worse than mine. We fight, we battle, sometimes we almost end it. But I think what came across to you, which was 1,000% true, is how deeply we love each other. We're misfits from opposite ends of the earth. She, born Jewish and Italian through her father's side, New York City. Me from Oklahoma City. And we connected and we clicked and we work because we're just so opposite. But I didn't choose her for sports because I need an escape from sports every once in a while. And yet, one thing led to another, and as the national nuclear reaction began to unfold, of course, the next question to me was, hey, maybe you could have me back on this coming week's podcast for part 2. And I said, yeah, it's a great idea, except what are we going to talk about now? Because I do a sports podcast, and it's not just loosely based on sports. It's all about sports. It's way deep inside sports. That's who I am. That's what I do for a living. That's what I've always done. That's my passion in life. And she said, well, we could just no, we can't figure it out. So that is continuing to be negotiated going forward, which is the definition of marriage in our household. And yet, day 2 of National Nuclear Reaction brought a call from a producer in New York City who wants to do a reality show with me and Ernestine. And my reaction was, about what? We're not that interesting at home. I'm obsessed with my job. I'm too intense. She's a saint for putting up with me. And she said, well, that's the point. Okay, well, I don't know if I have time to do a reality show because I barely have enough time to do Undisputed, let alone prep for this podcast. And she said, well, they're hot to trot. And I said, okay, let it fly, pursue it. So that's on the books. And as she announced last week in episode 19, a network has already bought the story of our lives together, which is detailed in a book called Balls that we showed again last week. It's been out for 3 years. The basic premise is how she figured out how to coexist with a sports-obsessed husband, made it work, and it's a pretty funny book. I do recommend it, even though I did write a chapter for it. And it got bought by a network called the GAC Network, which is now competing with the Hallmark Channel. So congratulations to her for that. Yet the coup de grace for Ernestine was, after she heard so much from so many of her friends that we just ooze connection and charisma and chemistry, that all of a sudden the New York Post, of all papers, did a big blowout on Ernestine's reaction to a question about what she thinks of LeBron James. And it culminated with, a couple days back, this big blowout story became the cover of the New York Post digital production. And it blew her away because she grew up in and around New York City reading the New York Post. And once again, she wished against all wishes that her mother could be alive to see that. But it was something, and I'll read you a couple of quick parts from it. If you watched or listened to the podcast, you'll know them, but it starts out talking about how Ernestine says, I don't bring up LeBron at home because I'm afraid to. Well, that's a little bit of an exaggeration because she doesn't need to be afraid to. We've never talked about LeBron at home because I don't bring sports home. And she went on to say, I like LeBron. I'm sorry, I'm going to admit it, but I do like LeBron James. I think that he's done wonderful things for being a role model. Okay, I'm fine with that. I've said 1,000 times on TV, I think he's a very nice guy. In a basketball sense, too nice of a guy. She continued on last week's episode 19. I don't have hatred. I saw him walking on Central Park South one day, and I was going to say hi, but I thought he was going to punch me if I told him who I was. Not going to happen, but okay, it was funny. So she said, I just looked at him from afar, and I was like, wow, he's very tall. Yeah, he's 6'9". Other than that, she said, I don't have a problem with him. I think he's a nice man. I would like to meet him and say hello. He could call me. He could say hello. I don't care. I like him. She's defying me to my face on my podcast. Okay. The Post goes on to say, Bayless didn't argue with his wife's opinion and said, okay, fair enough. Well, she's my wife, and I was trying to be nice and not just crush her on my own show. But the Post goes on to say, he did, however, interject a few times during his wife's explanation to note that James curses a lot. Well, he does curse a lot, among other sly remarks, said the Post of me. So what was happening here was, in this story, it worked for Ernestine because she was the hero and I was the heel. I was the villain here. In fact, the second paragraph says, Bayless, who has basically made a career out of bashing James as an analyst with ESPN and now Fox. Well, made a career? No, I haven't made a career. It's like, did I make a career out of praising Michael Jordan or defending the Dallas Cowboys or rooting for the Dallas Cowboys? Or I could go on and on and on and on and on, but that wouldn't work in this story. The story is that Skip Bayless's wife has defied him and she loves LeBron James. And I'm not sure which website did the Photoshop picture, but they took the picture of me and her off the back cover of her book, Balls, and they Photoshopped LeBron's face. I think you can see it behind me right now, and she's hugging LeBron. Okay, I LOL'd. I laughed out loud. So did she. We laughed about it for 2 full days because, again, I'm not threatened by LeBron with my wife. And yet it did lead her finally to ask me, do you think maybe he might call me and thank me? And I thought for a second and I said, no, he's not going to call you. Trust me, he's not going to call you. You're getting a little carried away with that. Well, she probably got carried away with everything that happened last week, and she should have. And I want to tell you, from the very bottom of my heart, I'm honestly not jealous of any of this. I don't resent any of this because I do think she has star quality, and I'm happy she got to display it for your eyes and your ears last week. And I do hope that she goes on, and I do hope that she pursues something other than joining me on my podcast, unless we decide together to do a very different podcast about life or pop culture or whatever that might be. Anything but sports. In the end, I don't talk to her about sports. I'd never talked to her about LeBron at home, even though what I love the most about her, what you have to understand about how much she's sacrificed and how much she's compromised for me, that she doesn't know or like much about sports except some NBA. And yet, trust me, she listens to, if not watches, every single minute of 2.5 hours of Undisputed every single day without fail. She knows everything that happens between me and Shannon Sharp, my partner on Undisputed, without really knowing what we're talking about or caring remotely about the sports that we're deeply talking about. That's my wife. That's how committed she is. I can say, oh, Shannon and I got mad at each other today in the D block of the show. Yeah, I saw that. I thought it went a little too far, but I'm glad you guys sort of kissed and made up in the break, because it came across in the next segment that you guys were cool with each other. So she listens carefully, she watches carefully, and she's very TV savvy, because her job for years and years that I knew her in New York as a PR executive was to book celebrities, guests, on morning TV shows. And she is just a savant in telling me who will and will not work on television. And yet the irony is, she never said that she would work on television, and she does. So I hope she can find an outlet, YouTube, social media, some other outlet to flex that considerable muscle that she has. But I'm going to drive this home and stress that she has done so much for my career that I need and want her now to shine as her own star. Because remember, it went so far as this. I was hoping this would come up last week, but she was raised Jewish culture, Italian sort of Catholicism, more Catholic maybe than Jewish as a child. But when we met, I attended a Methodist church in New York City, and she just willingly, she said, I'll go with you. And she went every Sunday with me, the Jewish girl from New York City going to the Methodist church. That's my wife, Ernestine. We told you the golf story last week. Every summer when I go back to play golf with my friends in Oklahoma City on the course we grew up on, Lincoln Park, East and West, she goes. She rides 18, 27 holes, whatever it is, she rides. She'll drive the cart because she doesn't want to be apart from me for those 4, 5, 6, 7 hours it would take to play golf all day. She's going, she doesn't play, but she loves to be in my company. I'll drive this home one last time. In 17 years with her, never once have I been bored. Never once have I dreaded having to spend an evening with her. I look so forward to our date night, which is Friday night, because it is everything to me. We watch our movies together. We watch Jeopardy together. We have a weird, deep connection that in the end, I was so proud to put on display for you. I hope you enjoyed that video. You ready for more? Make sure you click that subscribe button for all the exclusive content from the Skip Bayless Show. And don't forget to check out the full episode of the show wherever you get your podcasts by clicking the link in the description.